Yeah, one of my favourite days of the year, this actually, the first Champions League day. I think you look at the ties that we've got already over the next couple of days, they're
Oh,
absolutely terrific. And Newcastle, obviously, it's a great story, them being back in the Champions League for the first time in a couple of decades. I do think that this group, as well as being very exciting for their fans, I do think they can raise their game and compete
yeah.
because the other teams in that group will look at them and think, we've drawn, a top four Premier League team. So that group's going to have a lot of twists and turns. And I agree with you about Milan needing to bounce back, but it's really interesting knowing where Milan's level is
Right.
because they got to the semi-finals last season, did ever so well. But you look at the group stage last season, Chelsea were able to beat them comfortably home and away, and we know what happened to Chelsea in the end. So I think it's really interesting tonight just to see where Milan's level is and to see where Newcastle's is.
Who's the biggest dangers tonight, Kev, for Newcastle in that Milan team?
Well, I was going to say to you, Kev, just before you answer that, I saw the highlights. Mkhitaryan got a couple of goals at the weekend, and
Right.
I think Thuram scored an absolute beauty. But just sorry to interrupt that question, Kevin. Who would you have down as the biggest dangers?
In terms of Milan, I mean, Rafael Leao is the one.
Yeah.
I mean, he's capable of coming up with something out of nothing. I think Kieran Trippier's got a really important job tonight to try and handle him.
He's a good player, he is, Kev, as well.
Yeah.
He's a top player, isn't he?
Yeah, super player, because he's one of those players that, because Newcastle tend to be quite well organised, right? That's one of the big reasons why they're actually in the Champions League in the first place. And Rafael Leao is the kind of person who can rip up those plans and leave them in tatters on the floor because he can go past players. He's got a nice burst of pace. He can come up with a brilliant shot from range. So he's a real danger. Christian Pulisic's gone there and has settled in well. They've been playing this 4-3-3, which has been quite successful. Of course, the big story is Tonali, because Tonali's back at San Siro already, having made that move from Milan to Newcastle in the summer. Now, it's interesting because Milan fans, I think, were really angry about that. They weren't happy about losing him. He's a Milan fan. He was somebody they really identified with. He was a big part of them winning the Scudetto a couple of seasons ago. However, what they've been able to do is use that money to bring in a clutch of players, largely young players. And you look at that squad, and it does maybe look deeper than it was before. So, it's one thing to have the money, but you've got to use it well, and they do seem to have so far.
Kev, tell me, Andy and I were speaking earlier on, I couldn't agree more with you about that group at Newcastle, and I think it's a brilliant group for them, but I don't necessarily think the winners will come out that group. Manchester City, obviously holders. Who would you see as the biggest danger? Would it be the usual suspects, Real Madrid, potentially Bayern Munich?
Yeah, I think so. I think Real Madrid, I know people look at the loss of Benzema and think that's a massive deal, and I understand why. But I think if Vinicius Junior can be fit over the course of the season, and Rodrigo, if you've got those two in front of Jude Bellingham, and then all of the midfield talent they've got behind that, then I think Real Madrid have got a chance. Absolutely. I think they'll have been wounded, obviously, by what happened against Manchester City last season. Thibaut Courtois being out long-term is a big blow. Kepa's got to step up over the course of the season. So we'll see how that goes. Bayern, like Real Madrid, have some cracks to paper over.
Yeah.
I think Harry Kane coming in is brilliant for them. Gives them, an elite goal-scoring option, as they had with Lewandowski for so many years. But the balance of the team isn't quite right. I still think Thomas Tuchel's still bedding down exactly how he wants them to play. But I think if they can get that right, having Harry Kane in the back end of the tournament does you no harm at all.
Kev, just also talk to us a bit about Celtic's group. I mean, they're at Feyenoord tonight.
The other game's Atletico at home to Lazio, I think.
Yeah,
Other way
exactly.
about, actually. I think it's in Italy.
Tell us a bit about their chances, A, for tonight, and B, of coming out of that group.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one because I think people would look at that and think instead of a group of death, it's a group of life, because it could have been a lot harder. But I actually look at all three of those individual games and think, wow, they could be really tricky.
Yeah.
Because Feyenoord, for example, they're the Dutch champions. A couple of seasons ago, they got all the way to the final of the Europa Conference League. then got to the quarterfinals of the Europa League. So they've got a lot of recent European experience. Arne Slot's a very good coach, won the league last season, was linked with Tottenham, didn't go there, and signed a new deal. Lazio are a bit hit and miss. They made a bad start to the season, but Maurizio Sarri is a very, very good coach.
Nice.
It's interesting, actually.
Yeah.
They've got Atletico Madrid tonight, and Simeone's going back to Lazio, who used to play for. He won the league and he won the cup under Sven-Göran Eriksson. And they asked Simeone about Sarri, and he said, I've always loved his style, and we've taken parts of his game and used them ourselves. So that shows you the kind of respect coaches have for Sarri. So there are no easy games in that group for Celtic at all.
Kev, I'm going to a break, but it'd be wrong of me not to ask you at this early stage in proceedings, who's your tip to win it?
Never back against Real Madrid.
talkSPORT Breakfast, waking you up Monday to Friday morning from 6 a.m. on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.